So, have you ever been dating a dismissive avoidant attachment style and found that they suddenly went missing or suddenly took two steps back? And it seemed to you almost like it was out of the blue, or maybe it was out of the sort of after something very tiny that happened in the relationship, a small disagreement or some sort of, pressure on the relationship in some way that to you might have felt small, but to the dismissive avoidant who just took a big step back, clearly it might have been received as something a little bit bigger. So, why does this happen? What does it mean? And how does it relate to this term called deactivation? So, the first thing you need to know is that attachment styles, specifically the insecurely attached styles, have something called activating and deactivating strategies. In other words, these things are ways of trying to maximize the proximity in a relationship. If we're activating and like trying to get closer and closer to somebody, or we are deactivating. We are trying to diminish our attachment needs in a relationship. So, why does this happen for a dismissive avoidant? And what are the things that would actually cause them to do this? Well, first and foremost, dismissive avoidants grow up in an upbringing or household where a lot of their needs for closeness are simply not met. And so essentially the dismissive avoidant, even if they had like a baseline level of security, they usually didn't have very much emotional connection or nurturing whatsoever. And this causes them to feel like, okay, I cannot get my needs met for this depth of connection or closeness. So, what they do to create relief is they adapt to that kind of situation or environment by actually trying to minimize their attachment needs to other people so that they don't set themselves up for what their subconscious mind expects to experience again, because we tend to, at a subconscious level, experience that if this was our past, it must inevitably be our future, even though our conscious mind may know better and see that logically that doesn't always have to be the case. In other words, if a dismissive avoidant grows up in a household where they feel like their needs for emotional connection and attachment are just constantly rejected, then they assume that that will only be the case in their future relationships. So they adapt by being like, okay, well, then I don't want to need people. So I don't have to feel like that again. And so without even consciously choosing, their subconscious is constantly trying to diminish their attachment needs and essentially kind of convince themselves that they don't really need anybody else. Now, what often happens is in the beginning stage or the dating stage of relationships, DAs are not scared yet, right? They don't feel too vulnerable. So they can be themselves. They can be who they would be without those old fears and wounds popping up from the past. But the more and more closeness happens, the more vulnerable the dismissive avoidant feels. And vulnerability reminds them of when they were a child and how it felt to not get their needs met when they were vulnerable. And so the more the vulnerability goes up, the more their need to try to undo that vulnerability and try to create space and get relief also rises. And so essentially what you'll see is this is when dismissive avoidants start to actually become almost hypersensitive in their own way, but not to all things happening in a relationship, specifically the things that make them feel vulnerable, make them feel like there's pressure to be more vulnerable, or make them feel like there could be some kind of argument or conflict that causes them to feel a lot of feelings and thus also feel vulnerable. And so dismissive avoidants go through this chronic process of deactivating, and it tends to be triggered around a few crucial things that you want to pay attention to. Now, by the way, if you want to do a much deeper dive into this whole topic of deactivation and just understanding a dismissive avoidant overall, I have a course you can check out for 7 days for free. And I'll put the link down below, and it's the roadmap of a dismissive avoidant. It is all of the things you need to know in a relationship with a dismissive avoidant to better understand them, to see what pain points, potential conflicts, fears come up based on which stage of the relationship you're at. Have you been dating for a year or 5 years? It really goes into all the different stages where you're at and what to do, and how to pivot and react to some of these different things while also learning to take yourself into consideration. So you're looking for out for your own needs and boundaries in a healthy way as well. So again, I'll put the link down below so you can check it out for free. So the next thing that you want to understand here is this is what the dismissive avoidant does, right? Whenever they're feeling vulnerable around an argument or a conflict, Vulnerable because there's pressure to move the relationship along, which again just causes them to feel like, okay, there's more vulnerability and deeper connection required in that process. Or vulnerable when they are feeling upset in any way or too attached in a situation, like their feelings are like coming on really strong. These are all the places that you're going to see dismissive avoidance tend to start deactivating. Now, dismissive avoidants are also like really sensitive to criticism. They won't show it openly. You will never know from their face or how they're reacting. But if they feel criticized in the slightest, they may often deactivate. And they deactivate to create space, to create relief, and to not have to expose themselves to you, the person who's making them feel vulnerable again, right? And it's not that they are trying to push you away at your core, it's that they are feeling fear of feeling that feeling. And when they're around you, they feel some of those feelings. And so it's their way of continuously trying to protect themselves. It's built on self preservation and really a fear of closeness because of painful past experiences. And so they do this as a coping mechanism. If there's pressure, they can deactivate. If there's trying to move at a different pace, they can deactivate. If there's pushing too hard to open up or be too vulnerable, they can deactivate. If they do open up and they're too vulnerable, they may then feel a shame hangover and deactivate. So you can see all these different experiences unfolding, and it's all in the name of trying to minimize to their own selves that they actually do have attachment needs, and by minimizing it, they're attempting to protect themselves and their emotions and stay safe. Now, what do you do about this if you are a DA? Well, first thing is that you want to actually recondition these fears. We are not born with these fears of attaching. They come through painful conditioned experiences from the past. And using the same principles of how we get conditioned or programmed, we can also recondition or reprogram. That's a really important first step. The next thing that you really want to pay attention to is that if you're the loved one of a dismissive avoidant, you want to be consistent in your communication. You want to call them out for things in a gentle, kind way, express your needs in the positive form, and you can be mindful of their pace, right? You don't have to move at your pace all the time. You can have a healthy compromise in the middle, but you also don't want to abandon your needs and your perspective. Compromise means we take both parties' needs into consideration and meet somewhere in the midpoint. It doesn't mean that one party moves fully to where the other party is and only plays by their rules. So you do want to be mindful of what your needs are, communicate them in a healthy way. And when I say communicate in the positive, I mean say things like, "Hey, I would appreciate more more what's the word I was thinking of? More content. I would appreciate more connection. Can we spend some time together this weekend and do a fun date night together? Let's do XYZ." And you share with them an idea. Um, and if you do it in that way, instead of saying, "Hey, we never spend enough time together, you don't care," that's in the negative, right? Communicating your needs in the positive, like towards the solution instead of just fighting against the problem, doesn't land well with the DAs if you're doing the problem based communication. Solution based communication with positive reinforcement is actually where DAs are likely to show up the most. And I've seen this time and time and time again, working with thousands of couples over the past 12 years or so. So it's really powerful to practice this. Now, again, don't take your needs into, make sure you take your needs into consideration. You don't compromise too much. Having that healthy space is important, of that middle ground. But by communicating that way, you're much more likely to be heard and received. And DAs are less likely to feel vulnerable in the conflict-based setting. They're like, oh, this isn't a conflict, it's a request in a healthy way. And same thing when there's pressure or needs to move the relationship along, say to a DA something like, hey, I'm really enjoying our connection together. And we don't have to make a huge commitment immediately, but I do want to know that you're also enjoying the connection and you can see this moving and progressing in the same way that I would hope it would. And again, it takes this like pressure and intensity and vulnerability out of it. So I have some exciting news, which is that we are doing $1,000 off of our lifetime membership sale to the Personal Development School, which means you get access to literally everything at PDS for your entire rest of your life. Essentially, that entails all of our different courses you have lifetime access to. I do 4 live webinars a week, every single week. You can access them ongoing, and you get access to all of our daily community events. So I'd love to see you on the other side, and you can access it by using the link in the description box below. So those are some important ways of addressing things. That we go much deeper in that course. And there's only so much I can put in like a 10-minute video. The courses are always 100 times more in depth and valuable than these videos. And again, you can check them out for free for 7 days. You can pick any course you want to look at for free for 7 days. It's more than enough time to go through a full course, sometimes even two if you have a little bit of extra time during the week. So I hope you enjoy. I hope you check it out. I hope you enjoyed this video and this made things make sense. And thank you so, so much for watching. Please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, and I will see you in future videos.